Welcome to the Rocky Mountain AI Interest Group. The following presentation, AI in Education, took place on September the 9th, 2024 at the Atlas Building on the CU Boulder campus. Presentations were made by Axel Reitzig from the St. Vrain Valley School District, Bobby Hodgkinson from the Aerospace Engineering Sciences Department at CU Boulder, and Lee Frankel-Goldwater from Environmental Studies at CU Boulder. Chapter markers are provided below in the description field for you to navigate to each of these presentations. And a big thank you to Susan Adams, who facilitated our September meeting. Susan is a professional development trainer who guides higher education institutions on integrating AI.
Axel is the Executive Director of Innovation at the St. Vrain Valley School District Innovation Center. Axel is at the forefront of introducing AI to K-12 education, and he's going to share how schools leverage AI to enhance both operational efficiency and instruction while empowering students to create with AI. Excited to hear what he has to say. And he's leading leadership in fostering dynamic, high-quality programs and strategic partnerships in transforming how we think AI's role is in public education. Thanks, Axel.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? All right. All right. First, thanks very much for the invitation to present and share a little bit about what we're doing up in St. Vrain. These kind of interactions are really important for our work. If you're not familiar with St. Vrain, we're north of here by about 25 minutes. We're the 7th largest district in the state. We cover 411 square miles with about 33,000 students. So geographic, big footprint, like from Lyons, if you know Lyons, all the way out east to Frederick, and then Meade down to Erie, and then we got Longmont and Niwot and Hygiene thrown in there as well. So we're a big district. The Innovation Center is a program that serves that whole district, all students, preschool through grades 14. And we're kind of, one of our roles is to be a sandbox for the districts. We're playing in spaces like AI and trying to help work, with the district to see what we need to adopt and think about and how we can advance the whole system through that work. So that's a little bit of context for the program. And we've had this conversation for quite a bit. Let's see here, arrow, space. Oh, the arrows. Try this again. Here. Okay, perfect. So AI is a good example of a wave. We have technological revolutions of, there's a lot of, it's fun trying to track like which one we're on now. Is it the third, fourth industrial revolution? We don't know, but it is obviously an inflection point in history where we're at. And so, AI is a tool like other tools that have come across our way, and tools are always two-edged swords. So you can use them for good, you can use them for bad. So some of these questions that have been addressed before, they're not new, like we're kind of thinking through the same thoughts. But there are some things that kind of distinguish this wave from previous waves, right? Namely, like it's a much bigger wave. So the volume or the scope of what we're talking about or what AI is bringing our way is just, I think, far exceeds anything we faced before as a species. And then the pace that it's moving at, the speed, is something that is incredible, right? Just generative AI is only not even 2 years out, right? Something like that too. And it's just, the speed is something also which is we're struggling to adapt to. And we call this like a double exponential inflection point, right? You got the speed, you got the size. These are things that for a K-12 system is a real challenge. Like, how do we master this moment? How do we surf this wave? And if you get hit by a wave, you can be overwhelmed by it. But if you can surf it, then you can capture all the potential in it too. So that's kind of at the core of how we're approaching, these technological challenges coming our way. And, one clear thing for us too is making sure we have a clear North Star. So our mandate in our district is to help our students graduate with competitive advantage, right? And if we're not taking into account these powerful technologies in the way we educate our students, we're doing them a massive disservice, and they will graduate with a disadvantage. So we take this very seriously, how we meet this moment. One way to illustrate or some of the thinking that we have to go through for that preparation for our students, is this slide from Heather McGowan. She's a futurist, right? Wouldn't you like to be a futurist too? I don't know how you get trained to do that, but she really looks at the future of work, right? That's a moving target. And this slide kind of illustrates sort of the progression over, let's say, 100 years. So maybe 3-4 generations ago, that top left old model, right? You get trained, you do your career, you retire. That was very straightforward, very linear. Then maybe, I don't know, the 80s, it started to shift where, okay, yeah, you'll get trained, you work in a career, maybe partially retire, get retrained, and do a second career, and then retire or something like that. But that's all out the window now anymore. You know, if we're trying to prepare our students for their future, like we're preparing them for jobs that we don't even know what those jobs are going to be, or if they don't even exist yet too. So their experience is going to be that bottom new emerging model, right? They're going to be working, they're going to be training and retraining, and maybe even retiring all simultaneously, all back and forth. How do we reflect that in the way we are educating our students? So that's one of the considerations that we really need to find good answers to in public education. And another way to frame, I think, this, when we're talking about how to prepare students for their future, is to reframe the conversation. A lot of conversation in this space is around humans competing with technology. So we don't want to have that conversation. We want to reframe it about collaborating with technology. You know, IBM takes that acronym AI and they tweak it to talking about augmented intelligence rather than just artificial intelligence. And so you can see the quote here too. We need to upskill humans, not deskill them, by learning how to interact and partner with AI systems. And you know, another part of this too is not just focusing on the technology, but what are we doing with the technology? That kind of goes back to that visioning. So having a clear vision and purpose for why we're using these technologies can motivate students, and then also really help them make sense of what they're going through. If we're looking at AI and K-12 systems, so preschool through grades 12. Susan already addressed some of these things. So we obviously going to have to talk later because you shared some really interesting things. But there are three, I think, broad categories that we are talking about AI. The first is how AI can improve the way our system operates, right? So operational improvements. The second is how it can improve or enhance instruction. And the third is how it can empower students. So I'm just going to kind of go through each of those, share some of the work that we've been doing, and hopefully it'll be of interest to you and helpful for you to understand what K-12 is doing in this space. So here's some categories that I see being discussed frequently in terms of improving the operational side of K-12. First of all, data management. And that's something, I'll get to this in a little bit too when I'm talking about students, but one gap I see in the conversation around AI is we're not talking about data, right? The way we should be talking about data. And data is at the center of all these systems, all this technology, our whole world. It's the new oil, as they say. So, but at any rate, you know, lots of data flowing through a K-12 system. So how do we manage that effectively and safely? And how do we use a tool like AI to get into it, to learn what we need to learn about our students and serve them better? Things like energy consumption, efficiency, right? That's another space that AI can be used. Finances, right? How do we manage our finances better? Cybersecurity, that's clearly a space that AI can help out. Transportation and facilities and scheduling. Those are areas probably that you don't think a lot about. Doing a schedule is one of the most challenging things for a building to do. So if we could make it easier and faster to create a schedule that best serves students, that'd be a real value add. Maintenance as well. Can we identify when certain things require maintenance and find cost savings there? And future casting, like what are trends that we need to be anticipating, you know, because things move slowly in the space. Like, you know, if you're going to build a building, it takes years to plan and get it finally built. So by the time you build it, it might be already outdated in some respects. So if we can future cast, that'll be good as well. Professional development and human resource is a big beneficiary of AI. Recruiting obviously is changing and hiring, so I don't really need to get too much into that. Supporting new teachers is really shifting as well, or even existing teachers, longtime teachers. So for our evaluation this year, teachers can choose to use a program called Athena that does an AI analysis. So they get a recording, and then it provides an AI enhanced analysis of their teaching to give them feedback and suggestions, right? And so that we're really curious to see how that plays. And that's purely teachers can choose to do. It's voluntary on their part. And then resource evaluation. for example, curriculum review or those kinds of things as well. So this is kind of the operational side of K-12. Doesn't get a lot of publicity, but it's an important part of how AI is playing out in our space. Well, how do we empower students and teachers? I'm going to start off with teachers, and Susan covered a lot of good stuff, so hopefully I don't replicate too much. I think this quote, so the Colorado released a roadmap for AI. Raise your hand, I'm just curious, how many of you were aware that we created this Colorado roadmap? Okay, anyone attend the kickoff? I know a couple of people did too. So if the last slide has a link to this, or you can just Google it, but definitely look at that because it was produced over this course of this last year to provide guidance for our schools. You know, saving time obviously is a benefit for using AI. Just creating lessons and assessments. You know, I've been able to do that myself. And, you know, grading is a big part of it. Recommendations. So I was thinking about the student who might have a high-end student or low-end student and asking it for recommendations to provide, you know, different texts. Or taking an existing text and having it redo that text to be simpler. Right, so if you want to take a complex text but make it understandable for someone at a particular lexile level, you could use generative AI to do that. And that leads to the real benefit, I think, is personalized learning. That's the big promise of AI. So, you know, teacher has 30 kids in a class, it's very hard to really provide personalized learning, but AI is a technology that probably can enable us doing that. We want to meet students where they're at. You know, we want to be inclusive and provide accessibility. So a lot of things are improving that space, you know, and it's just that differentiation that we want to provide. We want to improve use of existing tools. So Canva is an example of a tool that is used a lot by teachers. It now has a lot of AI embedded productivity built in. And so that's changing how teachers are doing their lessons or presenting or just thinking about using a tool like that. I think the real thing that AI will do is, you know, release teachers to focus on what humans do best, right? So one of the big lessons for me of all this technological advancement is technology obviously can do some things way better than people can do. So let's let technology do that. Humans still can do things that technology can't do well or at all. So let's empower people to develop that capacity. So I think that applies to public education particularly well. And it can enable students, as you see in this quote here too, to help teachers focus more on engaging directly with students and developing that personal relationship with them. Yeah, and then I mentioned the AI enhanced coaching with Athena. So these are just a snapshot of things that we're talking a lot about. In terms of professional development, by the way, last year we had what we called Exploration AI. So it was a series of like what we call pop-ups and some online modules for teachers just to get familiar with AI, right? Like, what is this thing? How might it affect me? What are some opportunities for me to explore? I think we had more than half of our teachers in our district, so that's like about 2,000 teachers participate in that professional development. So they're doing that again this year and kind of spiraling up and trying to get teachers then to kind of, what's that next level to get comfortable using AI as an educator. Regarding students, in my mind, I think of two different broad categories, right? One is what we could call literacy, the other is fluency. And a way to think about literacy is kind of like, hey, I can drive a car, right? I know how the car works, and I'm able to drive and use that tool. Fluency is really like being able to work under the hood, right? You're getting in the engine, you're working on the engine, maybe you're even designing and doing all that stuff too. So I think we have to think about AI education in the same way, but what we're teaching kids and engaging them with AI, right? So here's a little bit more what I mean. So the literacy is like knowing about AI, right? What are the basics of AI? Now, a lot of the attention the last couple of years, understandably, has been focused on generative AI, right? It's just so incredible. It's so impactful and broadly impactful. One of my frustrations is that we're not engaging students or our community with where that came out of, right? Again, to that idea of like, number one, data. Data is at the heart of all these tools and technologies. And we really need data literate students. We need a data literate citizenry. Are we having that discussion with our students? I don't think we are. I think there's a lot of work to be done in that space. And then also, what are all the other ways AI have been informing or affecting our lives, right? So every kid uses Netflix, okay? Well, you have recommendation machines, for example. Do they know how that recommendation machine works? I don't think most kids understand that, right? So there's a lot of opportunity in that kind of fundamental literacy space that for us to look at. Same thing with AI connections and applications. Again, how is AI used broadly? Like starting with their cell phone, but also looking at space like agriculture, et cetera, et cetera. I think this came up as you're sharing too. A lot of discussion around ethics and the social impact of artificial intelligence. We need to be having that conversation, getting them to think about, like that slide I shared from Heather McGowan. Like, what do you need to be prepared, or for you to be prepared for your future? Like, what skills and dispositions do you need to have, right? Is it enough just to know technical skills? What are those, what we call durable skills that you need to learn, right? It used to be called soft skills. So, and I've got that there too. So those dispositions, how do we help them cultivate dispositions that enable them to be successful in this really technology-driven world? So that's kind of knowing about AI. I've got my driver's license and I can drive and use this technology. Working with AI is really where we want to bring our kids, particularly at the Innovation Center too. So that's where they're tinkering under the hood. I'm sorry, no, this is still that literacy part. So working with AI, that's going to be a big part of their future as a future workforce. They need to get comfortable working with technology. So there's a lot of interesting stuff happening in design space, right, of how to make technology something that's intuitive for people to use. Embodied AI is something I'm really excited about, so robots and AI. So I would like to talk to you about that presentation you want to have coming up. Competitions are a big thing. So there's what's called WACI, the World AI Competition for Youth. I'm proud to let you know that 2 years ago, our team finished first in the world. Truly is a global competition. And last year we had a third place winning team. So that's a pretty cool thing. And really authentic applications, and that's our work at the Innovation Center, where kids are developing real AI solutions or AI-fueled solutions for real problems. An example, the one that won that first place award is called FishNet, and it's a way to help field biologists be able to track the success of the release of an endangered species in a riverway, right? So if you're interested in that, let me know. I can give you more information. And, been working with CU Boulder for the last 4 years, which is this, if you're not familiar with ISAT. And Peter, where are you? All right, there's Peter Foltz, and I don't know if anyone else from ISAT is in here too. So this has been really beneficial. They've been in our classrooms doing research to help develop an AI that can be serving as an AI partner for group work to help students improve their collaboration skills, right? So our kids are active partners in a federally funded research grant, working with researchers like Peter and others. That's been a really great opportunity for our staff and our students. So we appreciate that partnership. That's a great way to advance the work. And there are a lot of minefields here too. I don't have to get too much in the weeds because I'm sure you're familiar with these, but these are things we're talking about. Transparency is at the top of the list. Privacy, security, equity, digital divide, making sure every student has a chance to learn this literacy and develop this fluency. Overcoming the fear, addressing bias, all the things that I've been talking about too. So just to wrap up, here's some links. Like I said, we can get this out to people. These are hyperlinked, and I'd love to hear from you or stay connected with you too. So you can learn more about what we're doing at the Innovation Center at our website. We have an Instagram too, apparently, which I don't really use much. And then reach out by LinkedIn. Love to connect with you there too. So thanks very much. Appreciate your time.
So next up, we've got Bobby Hodgkinson. Bobby and I have been part of RMAIIG together actually for over a year and a half now. And we partnered up in just being thought partners for each other and kind of exploring different curriculum strategies way in the beginning. And it's really fun to see how far we both come along in our work and also just in our thinking. And I think that's what I love about RMAIIG is we get to be thought partners for each other and just keep advancing and enhancing how we're going to conceptualize this and think about it. So Bobby is Associate Teaching Professor in Aerospace Engineering Sciences Department. And while delving into the AI agents developed by his team and colleagues at CU Boulder, Bobby's work exemplifies how AI can shape the educational experience for students and teachers alike. He's going to explore innovations such as sentiment analysis tools, lab report grading assistants, and AI teaching assistants, which I'm really excited to see. So let's give another round of applause for Bobby.
Thank you. Thank you for that very nice introduction. So Susan said, Bobby Hodgkinson. Here's my email address. I do want to give credit to OpenAI for the images. So anybody here from OpenAI. So there's some really nice images here. And then I also definitely want to give credit to my team of students. Now I say plural here because technically it's like 1.1 students, but keep that in mind as I walk through these different developments that we have. It's basically been me and a student, plus or minus a little bit. So, hopefully that gives some context to the substance of my presentation, which is we can do a lot of stuff now because of generative AI, stuff that we really couldn't do before. And I think that's really bringing in this new fun aspect to teaching that I think a lot of teachers got into the field wanting to explore the fun, wanting to engage with the students. And we kind of get bogged down with the monotony and the administration and the grading and all of those things. And I'm not saying that Gen AI is the silver bullet to all of that, but it's definitely helping, especially when we have large classes. So you were mentioning classes of 30. To give some context where this is coming from, I have classes above 300. Not all at the same time. It's broken up into sections, but still, that's 300 students that I'm interacting with. And I would love to meet with them one-on-one and talk about how do we get you to understand this material at a deeper level, but it's just not practical, right? But Gen AI is helping a lot of those things. So I want to give a little bit of context. I think two of the speakers are here from this talk. All three of them are. Great. This talk was given 13 months ago, almost to the day. It's on the YouTube channel. If you haven't seen it, definitely go back and watch it. So to be honest, this was like my first integration into RMAIIG when I was at home watching YouTube videos on education and Gen AI and education. I stumbled across this video and I saw the clicker sign and I said, that looks really familiar to me. And then I looked at it and I was like, these guys are giving this right in my backyard. I didn't know about it until I watched the YouTube channel. So this was kind of my first step into this community. So very thankful here. Tremendous talk. Do a really good, listen to this. The key points here that really stuck out to me that I want to, have as a theme here, the importance of creativity and critical thinking. So these individuals 13 months ago highlighted these things as things we should be looking for in the future. That's still there. That's still a cornerstone of Gen AI and education. Productivity in the classroom. So everything from teaching assistants to automated grading. There were hints of that 13 months ago. We have it now. So I'll show you some of the tools that my team has developed, personalized learning, and then ethical considerations for AI in education. So I'm going to hint at that a little bit. There's a whole subgroup with ethics, in AI, and all of that stuff is obviously relatable to education. I want to throw up these plots here. This is the plot that Professor Foltz showed. So this is Chegg, right? So this is the stock price of Chegg. If anybody's invested in Chegg, sorry about this, right? But so 13 months ago, this was the plot, right? So riding pretty high, Chegg is the online helper. And then ChatGPT got released and bang, fell off a cliff. Where are we today? It hasn't gotten better for Chegg, right? So to give some context, this flat line is here. This drop is here. This flat line. And we're here down, this says 1.88, up from about $18 before, right? So not the best news for Chegg, but that's fine. We're not sponsored by Chegg. So another thing that I want to, use as kind of the backbone, the theme here for this talk, in the talk 13 months ago, Professor Foltz said this: most AI for educational systems are uniparty, unimodal. So basically, one-on-one in one capacity, right? So text to text, something of that effect, and focus on optimizing personalized learning and automating workflows. That was true back then. It's still true now. But then a few months later, what happened? GPTs came out, right? Custom GPTs. And to me, this was really a turning point in terms of what can we do? What could I do? Somebody that doesn't have a computer science background, what could I do to get my students interfacing with this? How could I use this tool that's tremendously powerful? How could I use it to benefit me? So GPTs came out. Now I could load in all my course material and then have my students interact with this as if they were interacting with me. That was the idea. It works about 70% of the time. That's better than zero, but it's not quite 100%. So it's closer, not quite where we want it to be, but it's still fantastic. Right now I can interact with 300 students almost on a personal level, right? There's still some hurdles to overcome, but I think we're getting there. Then I have these other ones. Claude released their version. And then I'm going to bring up Llama and Meta's release of open source when I talk about some issues with compliance and ethics. And this is where my mentality is shifting a little bit to bring things closer to home so that I have more control over it. But that also has some issues. All right. So let's jump in. These are the things I want to talk about. Some sentiment analysis is where we got started, lab report grading, teaching assistants. I was initially setting out to develop my own AI teaching assistant because that didn't exist 13 months ago. I could see the writing on the wall. I could see the tools there. So I started down that road, and Nathan, my student, is back here. We made some pretty good progress, and that's where these things were getting us towards, but it's difficult. And then this summer, I came across some other individuals who already have it done. So I'll show you them, put their contact out there. And it's working so well that I haven't released it to my students yet because I need to make it not work as great as it is. I want it to be a little bit more problematic for them because it's just too good right now. So general productivity. And again, here's this quote, right? So AI allows us to do things we always wanted to do, but they were too resource intensive. So keep this in your mind because if you're in the education space, this really does open up a lot of possibilities to things that we've always thought, I wonder if I could do that. Oh, that's going to take so much time and effort. Now it still takes some time and some effort, but you can talk to a computer and the computer can do most of that for you. And it's really incredible. So that's where this comes from. I wonder if we could do this, and then we do it. So the first one I want to show is sentiment analysis. So to give a little context here, I teach classes around 300. So that's broken up into 4 lab sections. These are hands-on lab activities that are done in groups. So a historical difficulty in this course has been, how do I assign an individual grade when they've done all the work in the group? The best way we could really figure out how to do that is have their peers, so the other members in their group, tell me as the teacher, how did they do in the group? Right? And then I would try to, assign a differential to the group grade based on, did they really overperform? Did they underperform? Did they just not show up? If they didn't show up, they get a 0, right? But what was their contribution? When you're talking about 50 groups, it's really hard for me to know what each individual in that group is doing, but their peers are tremendously valuable insights of that information. So what we had done is just ask peer reviews, right? Okay, you that's in the group, just tell me how the other members of your group did. Well, we have groups on the order of 5 to 6. So 5 to 6 individuals are giving pieces of information on all 5 to 6 other members of their information, multiplied by 50, 60 groups, right? You can write a little script to figure out that that's a lot of pieces of information, right? It's 1,000 pieces of information, more than 1,000 submissions. That's a lot for me to handle. So I asked the students, give me a little blurb about what your fellow students were doing, and then also give me a numerical score, right? Because at least a numerical score, I could write some kind of script to understand it. So in the past, what I had done is I went through that numerical score. Any student that got less than a 7 out of 10, I would then look at their comments more closely, right? And that was kind of my indication. Anybody above a 7 out of 10, you probably did just fine. You get the group grade and we move on with our lives. No complaints, everything was fine. Then we came across this idea of sentiment analysis. What is sentiment analysis? It's basically giving you an idea of the positivity, the negativity, the neutral feelings of the piece of information. So I thought there's a lot of useful information there that I just didn't have the capacity to review before because that's 1,000 pieces of information, right? I love my job, but I don't like reading 1,000 pieces of student provided information. It's fine. So what I did is, we wrote a little script that looked at the sentiment analysis of all this information that we have. So we group all the information, we run it through a sentiment analysis tool, and then we get a score and we do a little bit of math with it, nothing too complicated. But what did we find? Well, not surprisingly, we found that the sentiment score has a very strong correlation to the score that the students provide their peers. That makes sense, right? If you do a good job, you're going to have good sentiment in your feedback. You're going to get a good score, 1 out of 10. That's fine. Nothing surprising here. But what do I do with this information? Well, I used to just give it back to the students and say, hey, here's what your peers thought you did. Improve, right? And that's pretty good for most of the students that do a pretty good job. But what about the students that get harsh feedback from their peers? What I would do in the past is I wouldn't give them that information. I would withhold it, and I would send them an email and say, hey, can we meet about this? And let's just talk about it. Trying to integrate myself into their overall learning process. That works okay, but now this tool gives me access, of course, to those students. But what's interesting is it also catches some students in this middle ground that I wouldn't have seen before. So now I can reach out to those students too, and I can say, hey, can we talk about your performance? Like, this is an introductory class. If you're struggling here with your group dynamics, it's not going to get any easier, right? So I'm now able to take 300 students, 270 of them are doing just fine, right? Meeting expectations, everything else. And I can focus my initial attention on these students down here. Some of them were apparent before, most of them were not. What we can also do is the really low performers. We can send that, we strip it of the identifiable information, we can send it up to ChatGPT and say, take this information and twist it around into something constructively, right? So now, instead of getting feedback that says, dude, you just didn't show up to class, it's like, hey, your group members would encourage you to show up to class more often, be a more engaging participant. And it does a really good job, right? The students can tell that it's generated, but I think they appreciate it. I haven't run a study on it yet, but I think they appreciate it. So the other thing here is this report grading assistant. So in all honesty, we started out with this to try to completely offload the grading task from our plate. We thought, well, you know what AI could do? It could just do all the grading. And you know what? It can, and it does a really good job at it, but there are some ethical concerns with that, right? And I'll talk about that later. It doesn't make sense for me to push a button and then all 50 reports are graded, whereas the input to that required hours and hours and hours worth of work from the students. I feel like they're paying enough tuition dollars to at least get some kind of human interaction, some kind of human feedback. So I'll touch on this a little bit more, but essentially, we don't have the grading assistant assign a numerical grade. Instead, what we do is this hybrid approach. So we upload these assignments. There's 50 reports, 20 pages, really big reports, huge grading task for my assistants. And we have it go through and find out locations in that report that match specific rubric items. And then we highlight that. And then we pass those highlighted copies to the graders, and then they can just look for the highlighted portion for the thing that they're trying to find. Is it right? Is it wrong? What's my feedback? Okay, got it. Bam, move on to the next one. I got 49 more to go, right? So they're able to crank through these reports while still giving that human interaction. And some numbers up here. Before we implemented this, it took about, that's not 34 days. That should say 3 to 4 days. This wasn't that huge of an improvement. So 3 to 4 days, sorry for that, missed hyphen, 3 to 4 days. And this all happens at the end of the semester, right? So these students, my employees, they're students, so they have finals. So they're just trying to crank these things out too, but I want them to do a good job. It basically cut it in half. What I'm doing this semester in this same course is I've reduced my teaching team on purpose because I feel like this is going to be a really good savings overall in terms of personnel. So I want to be able to go to the administration and say, hey, look, this tool is saving a lot of resources here while still allowing me to give high quality feedback. I wanted the students to explore this too. So I had the students, I thought, well, could the students I could just give that tool to the students and then they could do it. But then I thought, no. They're going to enter a field where they're going to be expected, most likely, to work alongside these bots. Let's expose them to that. So what I told them is I said, hey, in my years of teaching, and this was the second lab, so I had a lot of substance because they all got dinged pretty hard on the first lab in this course. And I said, most of you missed a lot of points because you just didn't include things I wanted you to include. Let's have you write a little script that uploads your assignment and uploads my assignment, and then you just ask it, did I hit on all the rubric items? See what it can do. Most of them said it reduced their time. It was very efficient. It took me 30 minutes to do it, and the tool did it in 5 minutes. So a huge savings. But some of them said it wasn't really that helpful. So I feel like this isn't the silver bullet, but at least it exposed the students to this idea that, hey, I can use these tools for some things, but I shouldn't use it for everything. I mentioned a tutor before, so HighTA.ai, look at this. Bo Wu out of the School of Mines has this, tutor. You basically upload information and it has this Socratic style of teaching. Really good application here. Take a look at this. Colleague of mine, Professor Frankel-Goldwater here, has a, a similar tool, a little bit different, but basically Rita here is a Socratic tutor chatbot. Dewey does some investigating of that and provides information to the teacher. So as I mentioned before, these tools exist now, right? So we're fine tuning them. Well, that's the wrong word. We're training them the right way. We're putting in information. We're giving them, more use. Another company that's actually out of Boulder, meeting them where they are. So this is a text message. It's not a chat bot. It's more like a chat buddy. So this tool is loaded with information. The students can text with it, right? Students don't like going on Canvas. They don't listen to your emails. They don't do anything, but could they text? I don't know. We're going to try it out. So I've trained it on a little pieces of information in my class. We also wanted to see, could we do some stuff with Slack? So I got some inspiration here on the April talk. An individual, had a little large language model and they integrated into chat, integrated into the website, integrated into things like this. So I went to my student, I said, could we do this? I said, yeah, probably. So I wrote a little custom GPT that had information about the academic advising webpage. And then he pulled that down and then interfaced it with Slack. So 4 days ago, Inside Higher Ed said, hey, generative AI can address advising challenges. Yeah, we knew that back in April. Right. So if anybody is here from higher ed, we should talk about this because I have your solution. We're ready to go with it. Ethics and compliance. So I mentioned at this before, I'm running out of time. One thing I do want to point out that I've even seen with my students, the idea that it just needs to be marginally better than a human, I don't think is complete. It actually needs to be much, much better, right? We hold these machines to a much higher standard than we would another human. So I think in the development of this, we already have a higher bar than if we were just grading these things ourselves. So I think that's something that we need to be aware of. I mentioned before, compliance and privacy. We're starting to move things away from Sam Altman, and we're trying to have it housed locally. There's a lot of challenges with that, right? There's a reason people are paying a lot of money for Sam's tools, right? They're really good. The open source tools are fine, but they're not as good. A lot of challenges here. What's my policy on AI? This really comes from Ethan Mollick. I encourage my students to use it. I want them to see what it's good for, what it's not good for, what are its benefits, drawbacks. I want them to explore it, but I tell them they need to have ownership of their learning. And I tell them this quote, Sam doesn't need your degree to earn a decent living, right? If you just pawn off all of your information into ChatGPT, what are you going to do for a company that's going to hire you, right? And I don't know if that's going to stick with them. I have no idea. How are they going to become an asset? And I think the answer is they need to be able to answer this question. Is the information that's this machine producing, is it right? Both in terms of correctness. If you're telling me that the wing generates this much lift, but it's off by an order of magnitude or whatever, that's not right. But the other thing with right is it morally good, justified, or acceptable? So this kind of gets at to some opportunities that I see. So we're hinting at trainings. I think, K-12 space is doing a great job training their teachers. Higher ed is kind of like, well, we'll see what happens here, right? And I think that there's a huge opportunity there to train our instructors, train our professors. We're interested in this stuff, right? And there are some grumblings of this happening throughout the higher ed space. And I think that's going to continue to grow. So, in a year from now, hopefully we can talk about all the opportunities that exist for training professors and whatnot. Training students, this stat's a couple months old. From career services. So upwards of 30%, maybe 50, maybe 60, 70% right now. I have no idea. I mentioned familiarity with AI. This is a huge need. We're seeing it in the community. So I mentioned before, what are you going to be worth? What are the students going to be worth? And I tell them, hey, it costs a company right now $300 a year to have access to, the best version of ChatGPT. It may be $2K when Strawberry comes out, but wrapping things up here, I want to put together an educational subgroup. So a little QR code sends to a Google form. If you're interested in education, Gen AI and education as part of RMAIIG, we already have the meeting location and times. Wednesday evening, 6 p.m., I already have a reserved room down at the Aerospace building. So we're putting together interest, list of speakers, topics, things of that nature. I believe the first one we're going to try to do on the 18th. So that's going to be next Wednesday here. So take a look at this. That'll populate an email list for me, and then I'll send you out more information. All right? Yeah. I guess do I have a minute for questions? We got some, I know I went over a little bit. So yeah, I think your hand was up first. Yeah, monthly meeting. I actually have the room reserved for every week. So if we have a lot of interest, we could do every week. I've already broadcast this to my students and they're very interested in this as well. So we may have to take a different, lens depending on the other people that are interested. Yeah.
Just higher ed or like K?
No, everybody, right? Anybody that's interested in education. So K-12, higher ed, students, and then as
We've been thinking about AI enhanced citizenry, like really, how do we educate the whole world? So all kinds of topics.
Excellent. Thank you all. Oh.
Thank you. Thank you, Bobby. So we are going to do Q&A for all three at the end. We're going to have all three speakers up here. So you can, if your question did not get answered, we will certainly have an opportunity at the end for a larger Q&A as we normally do. All right. So next up is Lee Frankel-Goldwater. I'm excited about this. Just met Lee this week. Assistant teaching professor in environmental studies here at CU. And he'll be closing us out by zooming out and examining the broader context of generative AI in higher education. He'll offer insights into what the future holds for both students and educators as we get this embedded in academia. Go for it, Lee.
So the AI preparation gap, trends and questions for higher ed. So a little roadmap of what I'm going to cover with you. Why is generative AI, or just AI, causing a stir for higher ed, teaching and learning? What is this preparation gap I'm talking about? And what are some top 5 trends, questions, and experiments to come? I think that's a really important quality here. We don't know the answers of what's coming next, but we're trying to figure them out, dovetailing many different ways at once. And then maybe how can we ease that gap? A few claims there. And to tell you a little about an upcoming initiative called the AI Literacy Ambassadors Program. So let's dive right in. So first, I'm going to talk about a few things that are probably familiar to most people in this room. What are the potential benefits of AI? In higher education, teaching and learning in general. Tailored experiences, like these custom bots and things that we're seeing. Tailored experiences not just for students, but for the faculty as well. Innovation, it opens doors to new forms of creativity and learning. Efficiency, content generation and validation, reducing manual effort, like we just saw Bobby talking about. And then scalability. We can engage with many users, meaning like students and faculty, all at once, producing vast amounts of content in a short time. But there's some concerns too that we're aware of. Authenticity, this idea of authorship and knowing who did the work. Over-reliance, which I think captures a lot of the key issues we're worried about, of students just going to it right away and everyone going to it right away to just do everything and thinking that they got that learning and result. Misuse, potential for generating misleading or harmful content. And then ethical dilemmas that we've seen. Issues relating to data privacy, cultural bias, sources, and more. But there's one thing I think that brings all of these together. Why we have a room full of people like this doing this. We've had a group this big meeting for over a year now, right? How often is it hard to get us to 5 people to come to a group to do anything? Why are we so interested? Disruption. We all know that in all sectors, education, everything, this is creating change. And like our first speaker shared this idea of a wave coming through, we know it's a tidal wave of a kind, and we want to be able to surf it. We're all very interested in this idea of, we know, everyone in this room knows a giant rock got thrown in the pond, and we want to know what the ripples are. This idea of disruption is happening, and I'm actually excited about this term, not scared by it. But I do know it's coming, and I think we do know that this disruption is here. So a very little preliminary research just I did with a clicker poll in one of my classes here at CU. 51 students in an upper level environmental studies course. I asked them this question. Have you personally used generative AI in an assignment at CU? And if you do that little bit of math right there, you have almost 75% said A and B last spring. I would bet money that a bunch of that 16% are now in the A and B column. And I bet you even some of D were like, screw it. I'm going to get on board, right? So what does this show? I think it shows that students are likely very much using AI for classes. Sure, is it perfect social science that 51 students, that was about 2/3 of a class in one environmental studies section representing all of CU? No, but is it probably somewhere in that bell curve area? Yeah, I would think so. So it's showing us that they're very much likely using it. There's great value in research and understanding these usage patterns. And I really think understanding AI's impacts is vital for both students and faculty, which is something we could probably all agree in. But now, a little participation moment. How many in this room believe that 75% of instructors are ready for the impacts of AI by student use? Hands. Not a one of you. Gotcha. Okay, perfect. How many believe students use AI more frequently than their instructors? Got probably all of you too, right? All right, we're making a point here. How many of us know a teacher that's broadly conceived, pre-K, any walk of teaching, who's expressed concern at a lack of AI preparedness? Vast majority of folks in this room raise their hand. So what does this show me? It shows something that I'm calling the AI preparation gap. And this is a very rough model to demonstrate a point. There are so many different ways we can look at this, and curves and logarithms and everything like that. Let's look at the basic idea that at some point in time, there was really no need to prepare for AI, at least conceivably, until, what was that, around a year or two ago when this public version of ChatGPT 3 came out. At some point, this divergence started occurring over time. And what we have is a rate of use over time going up. And along these two lines here, we have the orange, which is the relative adoption by students, and then the AI preparation by university over time, which can mean the institution as a whole. It can mean an individual instructor, broadly conceived. And what this model is trying to say is that as time goes on, this gap can widen. And it creates this sense of urgency potential to say, how do we prepare? Because the real issue is, the longer we wait, the greater that disruptive impact will be of the impacts of AI, the greater risk of disruption over time. But the question is, where are we now? I have no idea. Do you? We hope we're over here. We hope we're over here. But that's right. Wishful thinking. We were maybe there 10 minutes after ChatGPT 3 came out, and then things fell apart. Where are we along the way? I think this is a really, really important concept to keep in mind as we're moving forward, because why invest now? Why work hard now? Why prepare now? Why think now? It's so that we can catch it as soon as possible, to transition on that wave as soon as possible. The AI preparation gap. So how can we move from disruption to transformation? Now, there's an assumption-loaded thing built into that question that I'm assuming we want to transform. If there's disruption, are we going to transform? I think it's necessary that some degree of transformation along with adaptation needs to occur. But so I pose this question. And so during the rest of this presentation, I'm going to share with you a top 5 questions and experiments ahead. And I put that A in brackets because these are not the 5 answers. These are 5 patterns and trends I've seen that I think many of my colleagues have seen that I want to share with you now. And the first is, can we adapt the detection status quo, I'm calling? Key idea, drawing this from Ethan Mollick, detection illusion. Teachers believe they can still easily detect AI use and therefore prevent it from being used in schoolwork. Completely wrong. There have been studies that shown that we're notoriously bad at it. I like to think I'm pretty good at it. I'm probably not nearly as good at it as I think. I'm just probably getting the ones I catch are students who are bad prompt engineers. And then who are bad editors after the prompts. They haven't learned the very basic lesson. First learn good prompts, then don't just copy paste the AI. Read it for 5 minutes and do something. But I bet you I've had a few who are good at that and have done it and gone right past me. Cheating detection is a keystone of the teaching status quo. Let's be honest. The moment Turnitin plagiarism checkers came out, everyone was celebrating. These things are happening. These detection softwares have, in my opinion, this is a claim, allowed class sizes to balloon, allowed various teaching practices to propagate that have worked to an extent, whatever worked means. Are students learning? Big question mark there. But it's a keystone, and it's falling apart. And so some key things here. The silver bullets, the AI checkers are inconsistent and inaccurate. And ironically, it's because the checkers are only as good as the best GPT model. So they're fighting themselves. It's like an equal arms race. How does that work? New pedagogies, there's some interesting stuff out there. One of these really neat ideas is using Google Docs, which has time trackers in it. You can have when every single word was checked, was written in, and you can have students submit their Google Doc to you. And then there's Chrome extensions that can show you a graph over time of when stuff was entered in. So have students write in a Google Doc. And here's the thing. If they are handwriting exactly what ChatGPT wrote, fine. Better than they just copied and pasted it, right? There's always a hack to break around things, but really neat ideas. Ungrading, class redesign. And then, as some of my colleagues have shared, faculty training programs. Some are figuring some neat ways out around this. A colleague of mine in the program of writing and rhetoric here has a really neat model that I think can extend to a training program. 2, for the student side, am I cheating? Am I learning? Do they care that they're learning, right? Key ideas, illusory knowledge. They don't actually realize that getting AI help with homework is undermining their learning. This is a claim. This is what some statistics are showing. And actually, one of the stats that showed in this Ethan Mollick piece was that back when the internet came out, there was a drop in the effectiveness of homework leading to learning outcomes. So just the ability to Google search for answers, or it's probably some other search engine like Yahoo. Anyone know what that is? Yahoo? Right, Yahoo search engine, great. Getting our demographic split right here. Checking on that. I used Alta Vista, by the way. Who ever heard of that one? So students are under a lot of pressure to perform. They don't want to cheat. I believe genuinely most don't want to cheat, but they've lost sight of the priorities. And I don't think it's totally their fault. Remember that larger class size thing, this difficult system, this pressure to get a 4.0 on the transcript? The incentives, and it's not one person's fault, the systemic incentives have taught them maybe learning is not the goal. Suddenly we get AI thrown in there and we're in trouble. So experiments. New focused classes. A colleague here is doing Writing in the Age of AI. A colleague of mine in environmental studies is doing a data science with AI class. Let's really bring this out to the surface. AI literacy class sessions, really having these conversations with students as a potential. And then assignments and course policies that we could say are in conversation with students. Some great ideas for student assignments. I'm going to move through a few of these a little quickly, and I'll make the slides available for everyone afterward. But getting seed ideas, asking the AI to ask you questions. This has blown people's minds. They're like, wait, I don't know about a thing. I can get it to talk to me. It changes that one-way dynamic with a computer box, right? And that kind of thing. Asking AI to critically challenge your ideas. Plug your essay in and tell it to mess with it. Tell it to say, what's wrong here? What am I missing? Challenge my ideas. Have a debate. Giving critical feedback based on a rubric. Help me create an outline or a timeline, and many others. So long as, in my opinion, they're doing the work. In quotes, because that will change meaning across contexts. Many of us have probably seen this one before, but I love it. This is another great Ethan Mollick rubric of thinking of different ways that AI can be integrated in assignments. Of thinking about it as a mentor, a tutor, a coach. And not just a coach for a student, but what about for an instructor? So some really neat ideas here. Another one that I think is really important, number 3, fight, flight, adapt, or transform. I think these are the 4 main camps that our colleagues roughly fall in. There are those who are like, we're going to resist it. Harsh, no AI policies. How dare you? You're going to fail this class. You're out. Often rooted in the detection illusion. Flight. We've all met someone who's just like, I'm just going to keep going. I don't have time to think about this or worry about it right now. Then there's adapt, which is robust AI policies in conversation with students. Learning about AI, keeping similar curriculum structures and patterns, which is fine. Actually, in my own courses, I do a lot of this in certain ways as I'm iterating and experimenting with things. But then there's the transform angle. Building new curriculum models around this. Programs that shift the status quo of teaching and learning. And the challenge there, it's expensive in terms of time, money, and brain power. But when we think about that preparation gap, where are we going with it? What might be necessary? Open question. And as I mentioned a moment ago, I think that our key stakeholder groups will fall generally in one of these 4 categories. So a great example of what a course AI policy might look like, of my work versus the AI's work. Am I putting in the same amount of work and time, but to get 150% results? Letting them know AI is bad at sources, to check sources, and to open the conversation with them. To say, I'm here you're not bad for thinking these thoughts. No thought police. Think the thoughts, come talk to me, we'll have a conversation about it. And then why not do it the old-fashioned way? You don't have to use the AI, you can. But if you are, explore and enjoy the future. So this roots in my summary of my AI policy. And then there's some ideas here of open the conversation with students and faculty. Have these conversations across departments, with and without students in the room. Talk directly with students. And this is from the AI Pedagogy Project, a really great program out of Harvard with some amazing learning objectives that talk and help us open up the conversation. Critical social awareness of AI tools, another great project that helps students critically examine what works and doesn't work in these things. So 4, what does AI mean for my discipline? And this has been where I've been hanging my hat lately, where I'm fascinated. Most people have at least heard of AI in our colleague space, and they're thinking this high level, how do we detect it? How do we deal with writing? But I believe every discipline has some overlaps and some differences in the way that they're going to go about this. And asking questions, AI will impact each discipline differently. The preparation across the teaching and skills is going to change, and there's no one-size-fits-all answer. Experiments. This is where custom bots can be very interesting. AI is a case study. Bring it into the classroom. I remember at the summer studio out of the Center for Teaching and Learning, there was someone from sociology who had said, wait a minute, this AI thing, it can apply to every subdiscipline of sociology. So let's make it a case study to talk about in the classroom. And then it's an inception moment of AI literacy via the material and subject. But that'll work for sociology. Is that going to work for everywhere? Really neat questions. And then teaching discipline-specific AI classes and drawing this in and making that a new platform. So some neat ideas I'll run through quickly here. AI bots as interviewee or project stakeholder, which can allow us to do things like model UN, where we have dozens of stakeholders out there that they're interacting with that can enhance with. Supporting writing skills and editing. Have an AI generate a really terrible essay and have them correct it. What an interesting idea. Support critical thinking around AI and beyond, and identify the limits of common tools to critically assess their potential for misuse. So lots of amazing ideas, and this is an incredible resource at the AI Pedagogy Project. Many such projects around, but this one is really nice because you can search for discipline-specific matters. So who benefits? Who gets left behind? I think this is the last but not least, very important. Disruption and transformation is a difficult process. Generative AI systems are known to have cultural biases built in from the programmers. One I remember, a visual AI identification system would identify someone, an Indian bride from India, as wearing a costume because it wasn't in the classic Cinderella bride dress. These things are built in, and we have to be very careful. Many in higher ed struggle with feeling underpaid, overworked, and undersupported. How to help less savvy tech instructors and students along the way. Grading bots, yay! But what are the implications? Will TAs lose jobs? How are we building these things in? It's not just about the bottom line. And what does this mean for the growing online learning space? So bringing it back, how can we beat the AI preparation gap? I'm going to make 3 claims right here. First one is we need more than technical solutions. We need social configurations and solutions that aid in this process. It's not just throw the water pump at the village and all will be better. You know, we need to create the social configurations to make this work. Instructors and departments need dedicated investment. This should not be just the work of the underpaid, overworked instructor or department strap. I think we really need the regents involved, serious investment that takes this gap seriously. And then to collaborate, advocate, and experiment, I think is very key to continue with. So I'm gonna flow through these last slides quickly because I'm running out of time. But I call what's next the AI Literacy Challenge. And this is one definition of AI literacy that I helped put together, the knowledge, skills, and attitudes to understand, evaluate, effectively interact with AI systems. I've created a little model for AI literacy specifically for higher education that involves classroom considerations, prompt engineering, pedagogy, discipline-specific context, and these collaborative learning idea. And last but not least here, a new program that I'm helping to develop called the AI Literacy Ambassadors Fellowship, which draws folks together, representatives from across departments, to think tank together the development of discipline-specific AI innovations, share resources, and to build even like a policy change system that can now talk to higher ups about what's possible to continue modeling this effort. So in summary here, we can adapt, we can transform, we cannot likely fight the wave, and we can't ignore it. And AI is not the cause of the problems, but it's a canary in the coal mine. There's a lot of things we've had to question and talk about in higher ed for a long time. And I think AI is not the cause of our issues. It's the symptoms. It's highlighting the symptoms. So what are we going to do with that disruptive potential? Where do we want to go next in higher ed, with or without AI? We hope our students can learn AI literacy, but we need to start with ourselves in our discipline and the future we wish to see. So are we using AI well? And how can we create a future we wish to see? Some more great resources. I've had a lot of help and contributors to this work, and thank you very much.
Wow, that was awesome.
Thank you.
There's so many slides I want to like stare at and look at and go to the click. Yeah. So we're going to bring chairs up and get a chance for everybody to ask questions. I think I might start with the first one actually for you, Lee.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So we have a
Turn
mic.
this off, or what
Yeah, you can keep that one on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I think so. Yeah. So we'll let you two use this one. All right. So now there's an opportunity for you to ask questions. And if you don't mind, Lee, I'd love to ask you the first question. I'm really curious about discipline-specific solutions. And one of the things that I heard from a speaker recently was every single college classroom has the opportunity to be an innovation lab in itself if faculty design it that way, right? Because we don't know what are going to happen to accountants, right? And the fear of that is real. And yet here we are in a classroom. Like, what could the opportunity be there? So have you seen any of that innovation lab style or opportunity in any of the exposures to either CU Boulder or colleagues in your network?
Yeah, like in active practice. Yeah, one of my colleagues, I'm not sure if she's here today, but she's been here, Diane Siever, who I know has done amazing work with writing and implementing it with her students, and really looking at that, because in her classes there's a really learning the writing craft, not just the doing of writing, the craft of writing. And she's really tried to engage with these questions that fall along the lines of adapt and transform. So I've really appreciated her work. I've been doing a little bit of this stuff myself, experimenting with AI literacy sessions in a media literacy and studies context. But I think mostly I've seen people with a good idea so far, trying out a little here and there, and it's probably mostly been people who've spoken here. So I think a lot of people are getting their toes wet into trying the ideas, but I'm not sure how many have really jumped in yet. And that's what I would like to inspire more with this ambassadors type program. Like, let's really try it and then report back in the innovation lab space. But I could be wrong. There's so much siloing and things going on. I hope there's a lot more going on than I'm even aware of.
I mean, that's the prediction I have for the future, is it's going to feel like that in all the classrooms, and faculty are going to be more adept at that so that it becomes innovative in that way.
Okay, questions from the audience. We'll start with Roger.
Thanks. So this is a question probably all three of you can touch on. I think this showed up explicitly in at least one person's slide deck, but zipped by really fast. And that is the issue of this, I think it was called the bright, shiny object problem of, is the right question to ask, how can we use AI? Or is the right question to ask, what problems do we have that AI might help with? And those are very different questions, because one of them assumes AI is the solution and goes searching for problems. And the other says, we've got lots of problems that predate AI. What are the most urgent ones that AI can help with the most?
It was on my slide deck, so I can start.
Yeah, that was on mine. And we, there are a lot of what we call bright, shiny objects that can be appealing. I don't know, like a lot of technologies out there that teachers get very infatuated with, and they think that can be the solution to whatever it is they're trying to solve. So it's more like the mindset that we want to make sure we're approaching this new technology with an understanding that it's a tool, and we're not just adopting it because it's the next greatest thing out there, right? But as I think you mentioned this in your question, that it's helping us. It's not a solution looking for problems, right? We know there's plenty of challenges or things we're trying to do, and it just helps us do our work better and really helps prepare our students for their future. So I don't know if that clarifies or addresses what you were wondering about, but that's something we talk a lot about in our district.
I could add to that a little bit. I totally agree with what you're saying right now, that AI is not the answer to a lot of problems, but we don't know what the next 6 months or 2 years or 3 years or 10 years is going to look like. And I think our responsibility as educators is preparing our students to enter that world with the mindset of, I could try AI, it may work, it may not. If it doesn't, then I need to go back on my foundational principles. And even before trying these tools, this is something that I harp on my students, you have to understand what the right answer probably is before you even go to a machine, right? Like, we don't jump right into coding day one. We still work on handwritten derivations because there's a lot of information there. And if your machine is telling you something, but the foundational principles are telling you something else, what do you trust?
They asked about whether AI should be taught in literacy or talk to students, what they're guys given. I'm talking about you guys in your own work as teachers, as educators. There's lots of problems with education in the world, and especially in America today. And, is the focus on, oh, this is a cool new tool, how can we use it? Taking attention away from, we got really big problems in education, some of which may have nothing to do with AI, that we should be putting lots of energy into trying to solve.
Yeah, I guess my personal response is I don't get paid enough to tackle those really big problems, right? So I've got to tackle the immediate problems, and hopefully that will spur, other resources to get devoted to these bigger problems. I don't know if that's kind of a cop-out answer, I think, but I'm not in an administrative role, so I don't know.
That's probably more relevant for my role, but it'd be the same, whether it's students or teachers. It's a tool that's available to us to implement to address the critical things that we need to address. So if you have your eye on the ball, right, I think that's really what you're getting at. Like, we're focused on the things we need to focus on so that we're providing the optimal educational experience for students. And it's one tool in a large tool kit or toolbox of available options for us.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I have a possible answer for you. I'm not a professional educator, but we're all educators in our own way. The analogy I come up with related to your question is, we've got a serious problem with climate change in this world, right? The globe is heating. I think everyone in this room can agree to that. And yet, if your house is on fire, what do you address first? And so it doesn't mean you cannot address climate change in its own way, but you do want to put the house fire out. The point is, AI is really, I would say, something of a house fire. And so if we and our educators do not address it now, well, then the whole point of tonight is the students are all over it. And so to me, the number one thing is, yes, institutions, not just teachers, need to jump in a big way.
Yes. There we go. We had, you mentioned cheating tools, and I was a teacher recently when we had cheating tools. We called them electronic calculators. And the way that we dealt with the cheating tool of electronic calculators is that we as teachers stopped sending home worksheets with 7 times 3 equals blank, 6 times 4 equals blank. And we instead asked the question of why are we teaching some of this stuff in the first place? Why are we teaching multiplication? Make that go away. And then from there, we developed word problems, right? We said, I have 7 chicken poops. They each eat 3 bags of feed. How much do I have to keep my chickens alive? Oh, it turns out I do that with multiplication. And so part of it, turning back to you, is we've got these problems and what are we solving? But the other is, what can we do with this tool? Now that we have this, we can suddenly start assigning things with tons of square roots and natural logs and so forth that would have taken us a month to do before with, books of tables. And now we have, now we hit one button on our calculator and we're able to learn stuff and address stuff that we hadn't before. So it seems like the question to ask, there's a couple of questions asked there. One is, why do we teach some of this stuff? Why do we teach multiplication? And before the calculator, that would have been a ridiculous question. But now that we don't need actually necessarily all of us to learn how to do the multiplication, just got the magic box, we can start to ask questions like, why do we do this? And then given that we've now, sort of freed up a bunch of resources, what things could we teach? The end.
Just an answer to that, I'll throw out. One of the things that I'm telling my faculty is, what can AI not do that you need to now teach? And that's another question that can come into play with each discipline. Teresa, I think you were next.
I stole the mic.
Got it.
Passing it down here. Question for Bobby, but I think it applies to other disciplines too. My background's in aerospace, not years ago, but decades ago. You commented about how your students, when they plug something in the computer, you want to make sure the lift isn't 10 times what you thought it was. And so that's always been a concern, that, all you do is sit down, plug these numbers in, you get something, and you just accept it. My question is, in aerospace and perhaps other disciplines, is there a potential for that problem to possibly get worse? Because now I'm more disconnected from the underlying engineering and physics, and maybe not such a big deal in soft sciences, but in hard sciences, the wing has to lift the plane.
No one can mention
Dude, we don't have a Boeing rep here, dude. Their problem wasn't the wing, it was the door, among other things. But so the answer is absolutely, right? And I saw this happening before AI, right? I think that the students they have an over-reliance on other information outside of what I'm telling them, right? So I have a lab right now, and it's a wing about the size of your cell phone, 2 cell phones, right? And you could do the calculations one way, and you could come up with 400 pounds of lift. And I had reports that students were like, well, shouldn't it be 400 pounds of lift? I was like, look at this thing. It's this big, right? Like, you don't have to know the exact number to know that that's silly, right? So I think AI has some dangers, but it also has a lot of opportunities, right? Because now we can ask them the conceptual questions, and we can focus on the concepts more so than the monotony of writing the code and line code and line code and line code. I mean, so a lot of these problems take 100 lines worth of code. Some of them take more than that, right? And I tell them day one, I said, entry-level coding positions are non-existent today, and they're not going to come back in 2 years, right? The need for you to write line code when you get hired is gone. We don't need that anymore, because you can now talk to a computer and it's going to produce much better code than I could write, let alone what you could write, right? But your responsibility is the output of that code. Does a 400-pound lift make sense on your cell phone? No, it's 4 pounds, right? That's reasonable. So I think it's going to have a lot of hurdles that we have to overcome, because there is going to be a reliance. And to the point over here, I think we have to embrace that these students view this as the solutions manual, right? They think, I got the solutions manual here, right? He doesn't know about it. Dude, I know about it. And I know that the answer it's going to give you is not the right answer. 30% of the time, 70% of the time, it's going to give you a pretty good answer. But you don't know right now until you can think about this problem just from a concept. So related to multiplication, why do we teach multiplication still? Because it helps build the synapses that you need to then tackle more important problems. If my daughter was reliant on her calculator, when it comes to doing cross multiplication with fractions, I mean, you're going to need a better calculator, right? But you have to understand the principles first and then use those. And I think there's also some excitement here too, right? So I tell my students, you're going to have tremendously high expectations when you get out, right? Much higher than I did when I got out and much higher than students of your age 5 years ago, right? You're not going to be writing line code. You're not going to be writing requirement after requirement sitting in a cubicle. You're going to be expected to contribute to very large scale, complicated projects because now you have an assistant. And it's a very powerful assistant if you use it the right way. Anybody else want to add? Yeah.
To try to draw together something that's touched on in all the 3-4 questions that have passed through is, and for the natural scientists, the logicians in the room, there's like these logical rules of functions. You have one input there of what's allowed, what's feasible. One input to one output's okay. Many inputs to one potential output's okay. Many inputs to many possible outputs is okay. But the idea that you can have a single input that creates multiple possible outputs is considered a logic failure. That's like true equals false. You're not allowed that. Too bad. That's the reality we got to live in with this. That is the social reality of the AI moment, of getting comfortable with multiple possible realities and potentials existing simultaneously for what may come next for us. With the experiments Bobby's doing, with maybe what your approaches might be to this basic math, to 3 + 3 on the worksheet, to the shiny object. Is the shiny object this big, or is it the size of the moon crashing into Earth? Because if it's shiny and it's that big, it's still troublesome, right? But if we can exist in the simultaneous potential of these multiple futures that can occur, then we can experiment. Then we can have the laboratories, and one day we'll look backwards in hindsight and be like, obviously this, right? But we need to exist in that one-to-many function a little bit, which I know the engineers and computer scientists hate, but you know, and I was a computer scientist in my early career life, but in the social reality, I think that's one we're in. And if we can get comfortable with that maybe place, that unknown possible futures, simultaneous realities, then I think we're doing something interesting, and then we'll actually find those transformative solutions together.
I just add one. In our district too, we talk about foundation innovation, and that the relationship between those two, you have to have both for our kids really to be successful, that we want them to be successful. So what I was hearing in the questions is, a little bit like, what foundational math knowledge do students need, right? Is that going to change radically? And then, where is that line? So I don't know if we know where that line is going to be. There's going to be some shift. For me, the way I think about it is if I get on an airplane and there's a human pilot, right? I mean, how much of flight is now automated? Like 95, at least. Yeah, so much of flight right now is automated, but if that automation kicks out, that human has to fly that plane, I want a human who's actually flown the plane and knows the fundamentals of flying that plane, right? And I think that reasonably applies to any other discipline. So I think the challenge for all educators is going to be like, where is that line? I'm hearing Bobby speak particularly, it's like, oh, that's really interesting. Like, they need it gives them some common sense to be able to evaluate like that doesn't make any sense, 400 pounds. So that's how I would respond to your question.
Okay, our next question is from Teresa Nugent. She was a speaker 13 months ago that Bobby referred to, and she teaches the Writing in the Age of AI, pioneering course here at CU. So I'll give her the mic.
Thank you. Thank you to all three of you. These were really great discussions. And I would like to ask you if you could dig a little more into the student data privacy concerns. Coming from a writing class perspective, I'm trying to figure out how to guide students on how much of their own personal thinking and thoughts, not just, they're not just talking to a bot about information. They're talking about their response to literature, their response to big problems in the world, controversial issues. And so how much of that should they be encouraged to put into the system, whatever that means? And what can you advise instructors about how to safeguard where that information goes, how, just some of those kind of basic guidelines.
Yeah, so the guidelines, I don't know, right? I think there's work from the university vice chancellor level to address these concerns, right? And I think there's not a clear answer to that, right? I think if you have the upgraded subscription model to ChatGPT or somebody else, there's an agreement that says they're not supposed to use your information. But that agreement is only as good as that agreement, right? What are they actually going to do with that? I have no idea. So I mentioned here in my talk, OLAMA, right? So this is an open source platform that you can put large language models on. We have one running Llama 3.1 from Mark Zuckerberg and Meta, and it's okay. But I'll be completely honest, it feels 6, 8, 9 months behind where 4.0 is, right? So it's limited, but it's also tremendously powerful because I can see the machine, right? And I can see the line connecting my computer to the machine. Nobody else can see that, right? Unless they hack into my machine, but that's a different story, right? So I think that at least right now, in terms of the resources that we have, if there's something you're concerned about, I would say don't push it up. The thing that I tell my students is don't give these platforms any information that you wouldn't give to some random stranger on the bus or the plane, right? And I think that's an okay mentality to have. It's also pretty restrictive. So I don't know, this is a careful balance. But I did wrestle with this in terms of FERPA compliance with names, right? We know if there's identifiable information, that needs to stay inside. So OLAM is something, I believe the university is working with an IT infrastructure to give access to students and faculty like the safe playground that's under our umbrella. That's a lot of work to do, right? So I'm saying this is an idea that I've presented to some higher ups and they're like, oh, that'd be really good to explore. I don't know where it is now and I don't know when it's going to happen, if ever, but I think that's the answer until the university can establish a relationship with a platform where that, user agreement has the lawyers that work at CU to say, this is what you're going to do. So that's my answer. I don't know if you guys have anything else to say. Yeah.
There's a startup out of Chicago.
Hi, Cynthia Colburn. There's a startup out of Chicago that I've just come across, Remilio.io, that is creating a platform for creatives to publish along with blockchain to say, this is mine. And I can track and it'll trace through the internet who's using it and whether they have authorization to use it. So that's it's kind of a protection of creative IP. And then in regards to Bobby, what you were saying, absolutely. Trend that I'm seeing is definitely organizations and corporations are wanting to bring in it behind the firewalls. Red Hat is about to announce, I think this week, Red Hat's announcing a tool for AI. I think it's called Instruct AI, that'll allow you to pick 3 different large language models, and it'll be protected with your data inside the firewall. So, and it actually starts on your laptop, which is really cool.
Yeah.
So you can start developing, experimenting. Back to what Lee was saying, you can start experimenting on your laptop, and then push to a production level environment. So just FYI.
Last month, we had a speaker here from a Colorado company called Liminal. And the approach there is a wrapper around all of your LLMs. And when someone inside the organization sends out a call, like let's say a list with student names, it will then mask the name. The call goes out to ChatGPT, it comes back and it rehydrates the names in. So you still get to use it, but no student names go out if you configure it properly. So that's another approach. Okay.
Go ahead. Say something to that?
I wanted to build quickly off of, because Bobby said very much what my perspectives are. The one thing I'd add is this data privacy thing is one of the most valid, important, and biggest bottlenecks to this experimentation and play we want to do. It's very important, very concerning, and one we have to take seriously, but it's truly a bottleneck because we can't do the play and experimentation at scale until that's solved. And so one of my claim points of like, get to the higher ups, invest what's a nominal amount of money probably in the scheme of a university to allow the broader system to start doing that experimentation, removing the bottleneck. So that's all I want to add.
Okay, next question. Sure.
Just because I know that information. I'm Elizabeth Romero from OIT here at CU Boulder.
Oh.
So, yes, Bobby, yeah, from the conversation. From the conversation we had with you last time we spoke, and we have been also in touch with Lee as well. There's a project proposal already on the table. So in about 4 months, that's the plan. We will have that playground set up to be able to experiment. And we are still trying to think how will be the best way to bring people to the platform. But it will be from the Vanderbilt Amplify product. This is an open source. Vanderbilt developed this. We're going to implement it here at CU. And it should be ready to go in the next 4 months, hopefully.
Wow. That'd be great.
Thank you for sharing that.
So the solution, Teresa, is enterprise, right? Like this is what we're talking about here. And each university is going to have to make that decision and decide that infrastructure. And I really think that 2025 and 2026 is going to be all about enterprise to get rid of this bottleneck. Great question.
So just a personal story before we go on to the next question. 2 weeks ago, I went to Fairview High School where my son is a junior. That's where Nicholas just graduated from. And it was back to school night. You get to meet the teachers. And so my son is taking an AP class in writing. And, the teacher told us what's going on. Does anyone have any questions? So of course I have a question. What's your approach to students using AI? So the answer was absolutely no AI used at all in my class for anything. So then I decided not to give him my card, which says honor.
Thank you. It sounds a little bit like each of you are describing a world where in the classroom and maybe in industry after these students graduate, access to expert knowledge isn't maybe as special as it has been in the past. I'm wondering, to me, that suggests that maybe, the future is one where project-based learning and really the doing side of the knowing-doing equation gets more emphasis. Does that feel right from your standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, definitely that authentic application is a big part of what we do in St. Vrain and their innovation center. I wouldn't underplay the role of the mentors. I think that goes back to that discussion a few minutes ago of what's that line for building that fundamental knowledge in a discipline. And I think mentors can really provide that guidance. So that probably role gets emphasized maybe more as we're moving forward. But anytime students have to authentically apply skills and knowledge that they're developing, that's the way we got to have them move forward.
And I would say I've been jumping out of bed every morning as an instructional designer going, oh my gosh, now we can scale all these complex pedagogies such as project-based learning. And faculty can't say to me, well, I don't have time anymore. I'm like, just upload it to ChatGPT and they'll give you 4 or 5 different ideas, including culturally responsive pedagogies, which are really complex, and that differentiation. So you're on the right track.
Yeah, and one thing to add too is these AI, I think, has the promise of creating more efficiencies. So a teacher can build more time in the experience with the students to have that application experience. So just having like personalized chatbots to differentiate, so kids can move at a faster pace, or maybe you want to pay more attention to the students who are struggling. So your more advanced students, they can operate more independently with some guidance from something like a chatbot or these AI tools. So that's another way we can leverage them.
So I'm biased, right? Because my background is in experiential learning, and I think that it's a huge, useful learning tool to get at the concepts of what's going on, right? Because you can do a derivation, you can mess something up about the derivation, you get an answer, and does that make sense? I don't know, maybe, right? What does 400 pounds of force mean on something, right? It's just a number. But when you have that applied in the lab and you see how tiny this thing is, it doesn't make sense, right? So I think these types of activities, AI is going to allow for more of these activities to focus on the concepts. But the thing that I don't agree with is what you started with in saying that the expert knowledge in a field is going to be less valuable. I actually think that that's completely 180. I think it's going to be even more valuable. And why? Because these tools are very good at doing things that have been done often, right? They're very good at regurgitating information, making small little tweaks, but the experts are the ones that can take this and apply that to something new. And these tools, while they can come across as very confident in doing that, doesn't make sense, really only the experts know, right? So the experts are going to be the ones to say, this is right, or this is not right, or is it somewhere in the middle? And these tools, there's arguments that say they'll never get to that point, right? Are they going to ever truly be able to solve a new problem? I don't know. But I think as those problems get more and more complex, the need for specialized individuals is going to increase just along with those capabilities.
And what I found interesting, looking back at, the educational transition element of the question of how much of our learning was so much before based on kind of knowledge consumption and regurgitation, where I think it always needed and should have been more in the project-based learning space. And this is where that disruptive potential is of which way are we going to go now that we have this impetus to move more perhaps in that direction? Will we? Or will people try to move back to blue books and Scantrons with pencils in order to keep up the regime? Which is where I think that preparation gap is so important of getting ahead of it so that we can turn it more toward that future we want of disruption. Now we can scale it. Let's do that. Let's support people to do the thing that always made learning fun and more valuable in the field rather than back to the blue books.
Question right there.
Thank you for your presentations and for your work. We've heard a lot of paradigms and perspectives and attitudes about how AI can fit into student toolboxes. How do we prepare them for situations where as they move between different teachers, between different institutions, the attitudes are completely different and they might have a tool taken back out of their toolbox?
I can tell you what I do. Before I tell them my policy, I tell them 2 or 3 times in 4 different ways. And I say, this is only my policy. This doesn't apply to another professor in the department. It doesn't apply to the College of Engineering. And I'll tell you right now, it doesn't apply to the University of Colorado, right? This is my policy only. And then I take it another step and I explain why it's my policy. So, to Dan's message, what you're talking about with the teacher at Fairview, I think that's fine to have an absolutely no AI policy, but tell me why. If you're going to tell me I can't use a calculator to do my multiplication, okay, well, that's fine, but tell me why. Tell me that you need to know 4 times 3 and you need to do it quick because when we get into these advanced subjects, it's going to be important that you can do it quick. That tells me, okay, it's not just a rule, it's an explanation behind a rule. Now, does that work? I have no idea. I mean, ask me in 3 months. It could be a total disaster, but that's at least my approach. And I think encouraging the students to understand the intent and the motivation, I'm hoping that sticks. Would it stick to a high schooler? I don't know. I don't teach high schoolers, right? I teach students that are paying tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars to be here. So I don't know if it would work at a different level.
And I'd say that's already a reality for students, right? You can imagine a high school and you have 8 different teachers there every 2 days or over the course of 2 days. Each class can be a very different experience. So that's already something students already experience. I just would have a conversation around, you have to be adaptable and, in the context of a class, you need to work with the teacher. I agree, if there's just a rule, there should be a good explanation of why that rule is there. And so engaging with the instructor to understand better, why is it that you have this particular policy? I would say right now, because it's such a fast changing landscape, it is going to be probably like instructor by instructor. Longer term, we have to have a systemic approach to doing this, right? So like in our district, what we're working towards would be system-wide policies that people are trained in, and we engage with the community to explain why we have these policies. So that would be the optimal way that organizations, I think, address kind of what you're getting at too. So people don't have that getting bounced back and forth sort of experience. So I'm not sure when that'll happen though.
And I really appreciate you brought that in because what I find so interesting, and I'm not an expert in the K-12 space. I have some experience with it. Both my parents were public school teachers my life. And something I've seen is very interesting. You get a high school senior in a very structured pedagogical environment who then becomes a fresh person in college, and suddenly you just have a person with a PhD making up a class on the fly, half the time. And you want to see the number one way to get academics across discipline to agree on something and protest in the streets? Tell them to do things one way. It's just like, so it's an interesting, like the differences and the challenge there. And I think where I see my thought to the question is, one is not blame the students for not knowing that, because how can they be AI literate when we haven't truly created the conditions for them to be so yet? And then is to really invest in that faculty AI literacy, because what Bobby just said should be a quote that every faculty should know. This is my AI policy, talk with your instructors. What percentage are actually saying that to the students clearly and being in conversation with them? So I think we're in that transition, like A prime to B moment, of figuring out how we can raise that AI literacy so those questions aren't stressful on students. I think so many students, they want to do the right thing. They don't want to cheat. Some do, some don't care, whatever. But most, they want to just know their lane roughly and go through it. They don't know the right questions yet. So I think it's on us to help each other share with them the questions they could ask us. But we're not there yet.
Thank you, Lee. We have about 5 more minutes, so maybe one question or 2 questions. For anyone that's going to be joining us at the secret undisclosed location, we're going to be meeting upstairs there. So we'll keep an eye out for you, but there's open seating upstairs, and that's where we're going to go. Nabil.
Yeah. Got it. Okay.
My question is a little different compared to the ones that have been asked earlier, but if we're obviously we want students to have some sort of familiarity with AI, but we want their work to still be authentic when they submit it. With teachers also using the AI with their lessons plans and stuff like that, are we holding teachers to a somewhat similar pedigree? What would that look like?
Yeah, so me specifically, I tell my students when I give them my AI policy that I'm encouraging them to use it and I'm discouraging them to use it in their theory-based classes, right? So to follow up on the previous question, I think we need to expose our students to what it's good for and also what it's not good for, and encouraging this wrestling with the concepts when they need to wrestle with the concepts. And then I follow that up and I say, this is where I'm going to use it in my class. I'm going to tell them the sentiment analysis. I'm going to tell them why. I'm going to tell them the greater assistant. I'm going to tell them what it does, and I'm going to tell them what it doesn't do, and I'm going to be very upfront and honest with them about it. So I think that transparency and that clarity, that's what I would want to receive when I was a student. So most of my teaching pedagogy comes back to what would I want my teacher to tell me if I was in their shoes? Is that university policy? No, again, it's my policy, right? But nobody's left my class yet, and it's week 2, so.
Yeah, sure.
I think we have another.
Just very briefly, I agree with you 100%. Thanks for bringing that in. And I think there's so much amazing innovation potential in the scalability and everything. And we just talk about it like no big deal, like, oh yeah, we're just going to use it and save all this time and money and everything. But oh no, you got to write every period and dot every I. It's like, come on. It's like, that's where I think the be in conversation with is so important, and figure this out together with our students together.
Model.
Exactly.
Model
I
it.
think we have a question here, right?
Or we take you. Yeah.
Who are we going to?
Okay. Just want to make sure you guys were pointing to somebody, and I was there's clearly a campaign here.
So the question is, what impact do you think AI will have on the value of online courses and online learning credentials?
I don't know. I think those are still going to exist. They're going to be incredibly valuable. But I think that the theme that I keep coming back to is a conceptual understanding of the material is what employers pay for, right? When we enter this age of strawberry, when the ChatGPT 4, 5s and 6s and everything else come out, and the employers can pay for these incredibly useful, valuable tools, the asset that's going to be worth the salary that our students want to get is answering the question, is this correct? Is this output that these machines are spitting out, does it make sense? Is it ethical? Is it the right approach? And Can you get that online? Sure. Can you get it in person? Sure. Is AI going to enhance online? Yes. Is it going to enhance in person? Yes. So I think it's not going to focus in on one area more than the other.
Yeah, I work with asynchronous online ed a lot in my role as teaching professor, and I think that online ed will be the most challenged by this in some ways because we lose that in-person time. But in the same way, it can be the playpen for the greatest kinds of experimentation. How can you take 1,000-person MOOC and give them an individual, a customized experience via these kind of tools? And I think that's the play space where we can do it the most and try it the most to see what new things can we experiment with, probably because it's at the most risk of someone just plugging in and doing these things because it lacks a degree of the human touch relative to the in-person. But it allows certain kinds of learning experiences that also can't be done that well in person. So I think you're right that maybe the curve of experimentation is steeper and the need for it is steeper. But I also think some of the greatest innovations in this learning space will come from online because of that as well.
One last
Maybe
question.
And maybe there'd be a blending too, going back just to the hands-on project-based, right? So maybe there's a whole new type of education experience that comes out of this, where it's a blend of the online, well, in person and hands-on that's happening. So
I just wanted to share one thing. I think we're out of time. On Friday, I was at a Midwestern university, a prominent one that lost a big football game, with my son doing a campus tour, and there were 10 different student campus tour guides. And I was struck, like almost every one had dual majors or a major and 2 minors, and it would be like computer science with a minor in history. And the students were telling me that they've decreased the threshold in order to get a minor or a co-major. And to me, that speaks to Axel's slide about this world we're heading into, where we're going to be in a lot of different fields. And we want sort of generalists coming out of college that have, access to multiple fields rather than they're just burrowed into one specific thing. So please join me in thanking our great panel.